Welcome to the UK general election special. In this video, we ask a simple question: are we better off? We will explore UK household income and various measures of inequality. Well, the answer might surprise you. As always, data, not feelings. Based on the media, we should believe the following. There is a cost of living crisis which coincided with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I did another video showing that the timing does not quite match. Furthermore, the new Statesman argued the following: we are poorer, but what are our politicians doing about it? So are we poorer? That will be our first question. Second, we focus on inequality, which seems to be only getting worse. The Office for National Statistics, ONS in short, stated that alternative measures of inequality have increased to their highest level over a 10-year period. Is this really true? We shall see. All data are public, and my GitHub repository provides all the code. Please feel free to get your hands dirty and explore the data yourself. If you need more information about data analysis, you certainly came to the right place. I have several playlists dedicated to analyzing data using Python and Stata. You also find links to current Udemy courses in the description. First, one should note we have median household income. This is disposable income, so after taxes are taken care of. In particular, looking at the median of a distribution is a little bit more robust in terms of inequality. So of course the average might be distorted by a few very high earners. This measure is inflation adjusted, so we don't have to worry about that. Of course, again, there are issues around how we measure inflation, but this is pretty much the best you can do. So what I did is I put the data into Stata, I did some recording of time, I defined my time series, and we just do a little line chart. We just have a little look at how this performed. Let's just do that. The median household income adjusted for inflation goes up throughout this whole period, for sure. Also true in the last period as well. So of course, you have ups, you have downs, as you would expect. Of course, there is the global financial crisis and the measures taken thereafter. There is the impact of COVID. All of that, of course, is in the data. It's quite often useful to take a log, in particular, if you want to look at growth rates. So the idea of a log is, because we have exponential growth, if you see a straight line after taking the log of income, it means you have exponential growth based on a fixed growth rate in percentage points. I did another video on logs if you really want to dig a little bit deeper. So I take here the log, then I run a regression model, do a prediction, so simply a straight line prediction, and compare the predicted long-term trend and the actual development. And as you can see, you get periods of over and underperformance. Yeah, so clearly before the global financial crisis, you had a nice juicy period of booming economy here, and of course after that things really change. But you see the long-term trend is still intact, but of course we are underperforming. So I think that's a fair argument. We still are better off, inflation adjusted. So in spite of inflation and everything happening, we are still better off. However, compared to the long-term trend, we could have performed better. Of course, you have to have in mind we had quite a few severe exogenous shocks. So in conclusion, one has to argue adjusted income still increased in this period, but less than expected. But to argue we are poorer, well, not really. Now, looking at inequality measures, there are quite a few. So the first thing you can actually do, which is quite nice, is to look at the mean divided by the median. So this gives you also a relative measure. So if inequality increases, you would expect the mean to go significantly above the median. Yeah, so that's so you have large positive outliers, so rich people that basically distort this. So if you just look at this ratio, this is very, very simple. This is long-term since 1977. So it gives you a first idea. But you will see this later in the data as well. So looking at that, you see in the initial period that inequality definitely got worse. Yeah, so in particular this goes up. Now we can just add here our time dimension. In the first phase up to the early 90s, you see an increase of this, and then it levels a little bit more, and then of course you have the global financial crisis. So you have a asset boom, crazy boom in this period, and then thereafter it adjusts back again. So it's not necessarily easy to argue that inequality is just getting worse. It seems to be more stable since the 90s. And you will see in a minute this is true if you look at other measures. Then I looked at all this and measures. I used the same data provided by the ONS, and the ONS argued that all the measures increased since 2011, 2012, so for a 10-year period, which is true. So I checked that. So that's the data they used. There are various measures of inequality, and I will talk about this in a minute a little bit more. But fundamentally, the problem is, what's your reference point? So what I have done is very simple. I used their reference point, and it shows, depending on the measure, that all the measures are looking worse. So the ratios are going up. So these various ratios, what they do is they look at the top earners compared to the bottom earners. And if the ratio goes up, it means the top gets more compared to the bottom. And there are various ways to measure this. You can look at the top 10%, bottom 10%, top 20, bottom 20, and so on. You can play around with these ratios, but fundamentally they measure similar things. This is not absolute poverty, this is about relative poverty. If you select a different reference point, say 2007, 2008, and frankly, why not? Why should it be 10 years? Why not a little bit more? There's no particular reason. Then all of a sudden this whole picture is entirely different because all the measures improved. So that, that is something one has to look into. So reference points really matter. So it depends what story do you want to tell. So that is quite irritating. The next thing is you can look at other measures. And Gini is a good example, Gini coefficient. And again, it's in line with what we saw before. When you look at the mean, median income levels, since the 90s, it's pretty stable. So that's the Gini coefficient for the UK. All the measures, in fact, you can just look at all of these measures. If you look since the 90s, it's rather stable. Of course, it will go up, it will go down, it's fine. But look at this, it's quite stable. The only measure which is a little bit more bumpy is the one for the top 1%, but this is simply depending on how it's measured, but even that is quite stable, honestly. So then to argue in this alarming way that inequality is just going, crazy up all the time is just based on the data not true at all. So one needs to be a little bit more careful. Well, we have looked into it. So these are the different measures. I don't want to dive into this even more. So it's as I said, just a relative measure comparing various parts of a distribution in terms of income. All of these measures, you can discuss them at length. There is no perfect way of measuring it, but I think if you have 4 or 5 different measures, it gives you a tendency. And as I said, the statement made by the ONS is entirely correct. Yeah, so if you take this particular reference point, all the measures are looking worse, but if you take a different reference point, it's all looking better. And if you take any other point in between, it will be somewhere in between. The thing is, if you look at the long-term trend of various measures of inequality, they haven't moved much. Of course, you have volatility in the time series, but you cannot argue, certainly, that inequality is getting any worse. Of course, again, have in mind that's income inequality. Wealth inequality, that's a different matter, but then you enter this whole debate about how we measure wealth, which is not at all trivial, to say the least. So, summing up, I always believe in analyze your own data. Yeah, make up your own mind, in particular when it comes to elections. I will never ever tell you what you should believe. because this is wrong, fundamentally wrong. I will try to convey methods to analyze data, get data, analyze data, draw your own conclusion. You can tell many stories with data. You have to be very careful. Reference points matter. The way of measurement matters. Go and vote, that's important. And let's see what happens. All the best, and I see you next time.